All right. You can either click create new, or if I'm using these, start it fast, I will come to the little arrow and I'll choose HD typically. It's a good size, not too big, not too small. Um, Control and scroll is the zoom in and zoom out in Animate. And then you've got your timeline right here. A few things to point out about your timeline. There's this little bar here that allows you to click and drag. It shows you how many seconds it is based on the settings. So the default right now is 30 frames per second. 30 frames or 24 are the typical. And then each one of these is a frame. So, and then you can see this little circle underneath there, and the circle is hollow. That is a keyframe, and it means it's empty. So what I want you to go ahead and do is you've got these different shape tools. So go ahead and take one, and I'll just click and drag to create a shape. When you create a shape, you can select it, and it'll have this little kind of dotted thing on it to kind of show you that it's selected. And then you've got your color and your style right here. So I can, if it's selected, I can click on it and, change the fill to something else. Now, now that keyframe is not hollow anymore, it is solid, which is just showing that there is content now. Instead of it being empty, there's now content. Now, if I want to add something, so I'm going to show you a couple different types of animation. First of all, we're going to do a motion tween. Now, when you're dealing with motion tweens, you don't add keyframes. So if I come to, say, 20, and I'm going to right click in there, and I'm going to say insert frame. So just regular frame. So if I look at this, there's not a circle, which is a keyframe. There's just this kind of little line or square that just shows you that this content, this rectangle I have, exists in all these places, and it stops at 20. Now for a motion tween, you right click, once again, anywhere in between those frames, and you choose create motion tween. And it tells you this has to be a symbol. I'm going to click cancel. Don't ever let them make it a symbol for you. It's just, then they call it symbol 1 and symbol 2, and it's really a pain when you're animating. So with this rectangle selected, I'll come up to modify, convert to symbol, and I'll call this, rec, short for rectangle. And I'll just make it a graphic type and say okay. All right, now when I right click and I create motion tween, it just lets me. Now when you create a motion tween, I'm trying to get it to, I better make a new layer so that I can select. I really want this to get deselected and it just doesn't want to. Oh well, it doesn't really matter. But when I come here, so that's the start position, and then if I move this, it creates each one of these little dots represents a frame, so there are 20 of them, and it moves. And a motion tween can do other things as well. I could select this symbol and make it smaller, and it would also change in size as it animates across. So with a motion tween, anytime you make a change, it will make a new keyframe. So if I come to this point and I say, you know what, I want it to arch up a little bit. Well, I just changed the animation, so it added a diamond, and now my animation goes up and then down while changing size the whole time. So with motion tweens, you set up your first kind of object, you turn it into a symbol, you apply your motion tween, and then anywhere you make changes, it automatically puts keyframes. Now I'm gonna, on this new layer that I've made, I'm gonna go ahead and make a different shape. And you might notice that there is a stroke option. So if I press fill to make it a color, and then, maybe give it a black stroke with a certain thickness, I can do that. Remember, if you hold down shift, it will keep it perfectly proportional. And then I can still select it. Now the funny thing, it's kind of an odd thing that's unique to Animate. I can select them separately from each other. So I'm just going to Control Z. If I double click, it will select the whole thing. But if you just click on the stroke, you can see how it will just select the stroke or just the fill. I've got to double click to select both. Another thing I would like to point out about the drawing tools, actually I think I will point it out in just a minute. Now when I made this circle, I was on frame 9. I didn't mean to be, I meant to be at the beginning, but because this is where my little playhead, this blue bar was, that's where it created it. So I'm going to click and I can actually move keyframes back to the beginning. Now with shape tweens, you actually do have to insert keyframes. So the big question you have to ask yourself with shape tweens are, am I going to change the circle or am I going to replace it with a completely different shape? I will do it both ways to show you how it works. So if I come to 20 and I say to insert a keyframe, it basically copies that circle onto this keyframe so that they are exactly the same. There's no changing. Now, with the shape tool, if it is not selected, like it doesn't have that little dotted grid on it, but it is on the correct frame, I can actually hover with my mouse and it gets this little thing and it allows me to like manipulate and kind of like change the shape. Now, if you notice, it changes because on 1 through 19, it's this circle, and then on 20, it becomes this blob. So now, if I right-click in between and create a shape tween, Animate morphs it for me. So it does all the kind of artwork required for the in-between. Now I'm going to create another layer. I really should be labeling these. So rectangle, maybe I'll even say green in case I was going to do multiples. Oh, it doesn't like spaces. Yeah, you got to do the underline. Also, if this is a little small to work with, because sometimes it is, I just hover in between. I can kind of drag it up a little bit so I can see a little bit more. So really get in the habit of labeling things. And typos. I'm a terrible typoist. And then this one, it'll be, I keep forgetting. They really don't like spaces. It's not allowed. Okay, so now on this layer, I would like to, okay, now I'm almost glad I made this mistake because it's an easy thing to happen. My layer 2 was my red circle. Do you notice how this one has a hollow circle? It means it's empty. And if I click on this little eyeball to make it disappear, nothing happens. If I click here, that one disappears. So I got to be careful and call this, I'll call this blue because I'm going to make it blue, whatever it is. And then this one is a red circle. Because if it's solid, that means something's there. If it's hollow, it means it's empty. So if you accidentally put things on the wrong layers, the way I get past this is usually when I'm done with a layer, I lock it. Because it's really easy to mess up your animations by drawing where you shouldn't. So I'm going to come here and I'll go ahead and do this one. Maybe something to show you on the options for the Polygon tool. You have Polygon. I can also switch it to star and tell it, I want a 8-sided star. How deep it is has to do with that, but I'll just go ahead and go. I can press this, and I didn't even pay attention to how I colored it. It just kept the properties from before, but I can just select that and switch it up since I did call it, say it was a blue star. Okay, so now there it is. Now for this one, I'm going to right click on 20 and I'm going to insert a blank keyframe. That means it's empty. So if you look, it's a hollow circle. So if I come to this hollow circle, now I'm going to draw a new shape. Maybe I'll do just an oval, change the color, change the stroke, and come over here and make a, okay, so it goes from star to circle. I right click in here and say create shape tween. And now it does this little kind of morphing while moving. So those are the two ways you can do shape tweens. If you just insert keyframe, and then modify the shape, it morphs what you had into what you changed it to. And then on this one, I started with a star, inserted a blank keyframe, and then created the shape tween, and now it morphs. Sometimes shape tweens can do odd things, so you be careful with that. Now I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to drag it down to the bottom, and I'm going to say background. A lot of times when you're dealing with Animate, you don't want to try to draw elaborate backgrounds and create fancy things like that. So if I just go File, Import, now you have the option of importing it to the stage, which is that white, kind of the paper we work on, or to the library. The library is over here, and it is where you can bring things in that you're going to use, but maybe not use them immediately. I'll import this straight to stage, and then I'm just going to go to get a picture. Some background. Well, okay, one background. It'll work. Now, once again, where my timeline is matters. So I do want to drag this to the beginning so that my background is there the whole time. In fact, I'm going to do a Control Z with that real quick just to kind of emphasize something. I'm going to Control and scroll out. Now you can see this background is very, very large in comparison. So there is this free transform tool. So I can resize things if I need to. I'm holding down Shift to keep it proportionate. And that'll be fine. Whatever is outside of that kind of black box you see there, that is what will actually show up in my final animation. Okay, so white background, that is because this is a blank keyframe. That hollow circle is a blank keyframe. It doesn't show up until frame 11. So if I want it to be there the whole time, I have to make sure that I've got my solid keyframe on frame 1. Now, as my animations go, I've got this background showing the whole time, and that one's not viewing because of that. So there we go. All right, the drawing tools, as I've said, we'll mess around with them a little bit more. Oh, they've got some new ones, so I mean, I'll have to mess around with them myself as well, but you just take it, whatever layer you're on. I don't recommend coloring on things. You really got to make lots of new layers on this, especially when you're dealing with animation. So, but it's just pretty basic drawing tools. And that's it for the very, very basics. If I want to preview my animation, I can go up to, let's see, Control, and just choose Play, and it plays it there. You can also go to Control and say Test. Usually I'd always say Test Scene. They've got different options. So this is what it looks like as Test Scene, over and over. Now you'll never turn in a test scene though, because it uses Swift. So I could test it in Animate, test in browser. So there's a lot of options. But just for a basic, what does it look like? Test scene is good.